For as long as we've had societies, we've had opinions on how women should look, act, and, well, be. But what if those ideals aren't just restrictive? What if they're also constantly impossibly changing? Today, we're going to unpack that, the ever-shifting standards of female beauty.
I mean, listen to that. It's just a dizzying, contradictory mess of commands, isn't it? Cover up, but don't be a prude. Be thin, but not too thin. Be natural, but hey, you should really wear some makeup. It's a total no-win situation. And that's really the heart of it all. So many women feel like they've been conditioned to fit inside this metaphorical box, a box built from all these societal and patriarchal expectations. The pressure is to be perfect, like a doll on a shelf, instead of a real, authentic person.
So where did this box even come from? To really get a handle on the pressures of today, we've got to look back at the history of these so-called perfect ideals.
Now, here's what's so fascinating. This idea that beauty isn't some fixed, timeless truth. I love this quote from art historian Daniel Kunitz, who calls it a fickle collective dream. What one generation thinks is the absolute peak of beauty, the next might see as totally strange or outdated. It's always changing. And this timeline just shows how fickle that dream really is. I mean, look at this. In the 1870s, it was all about the bustle, this really exaggerated shape. Then, flash forward to the 1960s, and the ideal completely flips to the super thin, twiggy look. Then you get the 80s and 90s, and the era of surgical enhancement kicks in. And now, we celebrate the strong, athletic physique. The perfect body is literally a moving target. Okay, let's zoom in on one of these collective dreams that's had a surprisingly long shelf life. The look of the pre-Raphaelite women, all the way from the 19th century. So the pre-Raphaelites basically created this iconic look, a woman with long, flowing hair, usually red. But behind the scenes, they were pretty scandalous for their time, famous for their affairs and a kind of free love lifestyle. But that bohemian style was so powerful that it ended up influencing the 1960s counterculture. And you know what? We still see echoes of it today in high fashion and even with celebrities like Florence Welch. All right, so we've seen how these ideals get built up and how much they change. But what happens when people start to push back? Let's take a look at how that metaphorical box finally started to crack. A huge turning point was back in 1963 with Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique. She basically put a name to this idea that was everywhere after the war, that a woman's entire purpose, her only path to real happiness, was being a wife and a mother. Anything outside of that was just not right. And this is why it was so important. It wasn't just some theory. It hit home for so many people. She gave a voice to what she called the nameless, aching dissatisfaction that millions of women were feeling but couldn't quite put into words. They were stuck in that box, told they had everything they were supposed to want, but they still felt deeply unhappy. And finally, someone was saying it out loud. And that dissatisfaction, it fueled a revolution. Friedan's book didn't just start a conversation, it kicked off a movement. She co-founded the National Organization for Women, or NOW, and they turned that private feeling of being stuck into a powerful public force. They started lobbying for real, concrete changes, things like equal pay, maternity leave, and reproductive rights, all pretty radical ideas back then. Now, that fight for women to define themselves didn't just stop in the 1960s. Oh no, it has evolved. And today, one of the most interesting battlegrounds for this same fight is a place you might not expect: video games. So let's take the character Alloy from Horizon Forbidden West. The developers designed her to look, realistic for a huntress living in the wild, where having perfect hair and makeup probably isn't top of the list. But the online backlash? Whoa, it was intense. People called her too chubby, not pretty enough, and accused the creators of defeminization. And this wasn't just about Aloy. We saw the same thing with characters like Cassandra and Eivor from Assassin's Creed, who got criticized for being too masculine. And the reaction to Abby from The Last of Us Part 2 was on another level, with her muscular body sparking all these bad faith debates and even transphobic attacks. But here's the thing. Let's just fact-check this for a second. Abby's physique is absolutely possible. In fact, it's pretty comparable to professional CrossFit competitors or Olympic athletes. It's a realistic look for a woman who has spent years training to survive in a post-apocalyptic world. So the backlash wasn't really about realism. It was about a female character who dared to step outside of that narrow, pre-approved box. So yeah, this brings us full circle. From old paintings to modern video games, we're seeing the same pressure to conform. The question is, How do we finally break out of the box for good? Well, maybe the answer is just to reject the whole idea of the box in the first place. As Sartorial magazine puts it so perfectly, women are not supposed to be put in boxes. We are not Barbie dolls and never will be. The point isn't to build a new, better box. It's to live without one at all. And defiance doesn't have to be some huge protest. It can be in small, personal, authentic choices. If you love wearing a full face of makeup, go for it. If you're hungry, eat a meal. If you don't feel like shaving, then just don't. Every one of those choices is a small way of reclaiming your own body and your own ideal of beauty. So, if beauty really is just this fickle collective dream that we're all a part of, it leaves us with a pretty big question, right? What will we, as individuals and as a whole society, choose to dream up next?